This episode of the Creep Street Podcast is brought to you by Martini Coffee Roasters. You know, people always look at me weird when I say I start off every morning with a big old martini. But then I set them straight, and I tell them I'm talking about Martini Coffee Roasters coffee. A delicious coffee made by the Martini family. They roast their coffee using a traditional method of sight and sound to roast those little babies to perfection. And they also sell green coffee beans for those home roasters out there. And right now, fans of the Creep Street Podcast can get 20% off their entire order by using the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Once again, for 20% off your order, use the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Martini Coffee Roasters, the perfect coffee to keep you creeps caffeinated.
You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, this is Maureen Bogey.
And this is Dylan Hackworth.
And you are here at Creep Street Podcast.
That's right. Welcome aboard, sailors.
That's right. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We are in for one hell of a ride, and we are so overjoyed to have you with us.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
To support the podcast, please like, rate, subscribe, share on social media, give us a review, tell a friend, anything like that. It really, really does help the show. You can also follow us on Instagram at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter at Creep Street Pod. We're on TikTok, we're on Facebook. And on our Facebook, we have a subgroup called Citizens of the Milky Way. And there we like to interact with people more regularly, and anyone can just post memes or articles or ideas, anything like that. We highly recommend you check that out. And if one episode a week is just not enough for you,
quit playing, Joker. You know it's not.
You know it's not. We have a great solution for you. Thank Christ.
Whew.
It is patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast. There we have all sorts of bonus content. Starting at just $2 a month, you can get some great, fantastic bonus content, ranging anywhere from short stories all the way through full bonus episodes. We recently did a bonus episode on leprechauns, as well as some ritual games we did not get to in our main show.
Right.
And we really are happy with that episode. If you want to check out that episode as well as any other episodes we have on there, feel free to check out patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast.
And we just put one up about the Dag family haunting. It was a Canadian haunting.
Yes.
At the turn of the it was like it was in the late 1800s. Very creepy stuff.
Mm-hmm, that's right. So we have all sorts of great content on there. We highly recommend you go over and check it out. See if it's for you.
Right. Now, full disclosure real quick before we get into this week's episode.
Okay.
Maureen and I are about to be going on vacation tomorrow. This episode will be coming back the day we come back from vacation. So we are actually recording this well in advance. If this episode is a little bit shorter than the usual one, very sorry, but we wanted to get this done before.
Don't worry, we're going to have some big banger episodes for you coming up in April.
And we're already working on them, baby. Well, let me tell you something. Usually we cover topics that will quite literally put a tingle down your spine.
That's right.
Well, this literally will put a tingle down your spine.
What?
Today's episode is The Incredible Electric Girl. And let me give you my sources.
Please do. You know I love it when you do, baby boy.
The Bizarre Case of the Electric Poltergeist Girl by Brent Swanser at Mysterious Universe. Teenage Boy Claims He Can Light Bulb Just by Touching It with Bizarre Ability by Kelly Anna Mills at mirror.co.uk. 9-year-old Boy Claims He Can Power Light Bulbs with His Hands by Sequoia Kennedy at Mysterious Universe. Man Claims to Eat Electricity Instead of Food by Paul Seaburn at Mysterious Universe. And Amazing People with Real Superpowers by Brent Swanser at Mysterious Universe. Now, what this story centers on, what many believe it centers on, is around the notion of psychokinesis.
Okay.
Now, that is something that we will touch on in a bigger episode.
Right.
Because that's a very, very big topic. But at its core, people debate, is this a poltergeist? Was this a case of psychokinesis? You decide. Or was this just a case of someone having literal superhuman powers?
Yeah.
Very fascinating stuff here. At the end of the day, though, what this story centers around is a girl from very humble beginnings. And this takes place over in France. So if there's any words we don't know how to pronounce correctly, we apologize. But the story centers around a young girl named Angelique Cottin. She was born in the year 1832 to a family, a very poor family, living in a small French village of Beauvais, located near La Pierre. And there she was raised, like I said, in very, very humble surroundings. Well, our story actually begins, though, in January of 1846 when Angelique was 14 years old. The simple life she knew was about to change forever. Well, one day in January, like I said, 1846, Angelique was working at a large wooden weaving frame. She was weaving silk into gloves. Now, if you Google like 1800s weaving frame, there are these, you would know it if you saw it. They're these very huge, Some can be smaller, but sometimes they can be very huge, very heavy things. So she's sitting there, she's just going about her work, weaving the silk, when all of a sudden the whole weaving frame began to shake. Angelique had no clue what would be causing this heavy weaving frame to do this, but it just steadily increased in intensity until all of a sudden, the entire wooden frame slid across the floor away from her. So she stands there for a moment like, what the fuck is this? Like, what's going on? The only one close to this thing was her, but there were other people in the room working as well, so other people saw it.
Right.
Now, Angelique certainly, in normal circumstances, wouldn't be able to move a thing this heavy. So she just cautiously approaches the frame, but as she did, it continued to slide away from her across the floor. It was as if the thing was afraid of her touch. She wasn't alone. Like I said, others were working there as well, and they all watched as this piece of what is essentially heavy-ass furniture would move away from Angelique whenever she approached it. So weird stuff right off the bat. And tender age of 14. Keep in mind what we know about poltergeist stuff.
I was just
going
to say that. Mm-hmm.
Now, this would only prove to be the first in many strange things that seem to be happening around Angelique in the preceding days. If she approached a chair to have a seat, it would slide away from her. On one occasion, witnesses claimed an entire dinner table suspended in the air when she got near it.
What the fuck?
The way folks would describe it, it seems almost like how a magnet will be repelled by an opposing pole of another magnet.
Right.
But this clearly had nothing to do with magnets, as she seemed to be repelling all manner of things, from wooden items to glass, steel, even paper. Papers would suddenly blow away as she walked by. And not just the gust of wind that you might create when you up, but literally like an
open window.
Like there was an open window or some shit. And if she reached out to grab anything mundane, like a writing pen, like a pen to write something, it
sounds like a real pain in the ass.
It does. It would repel away from her. So aside from Angelique's parents, many locals were witnessing these strange things, and rumors began to spread that Angelique was under the influence of the devil.
Oh no. Fuck.
Her parents even took her to a local priest to have her evaluated and maybe even exorcised if it came to that. But for unknown reasons, the priest deemed Angelique's problem was simply physical in nature and not the work of the devil, and after which she was sent home to be cared for by a doctor. The doctor was apparently at first very skeptical about all these claims surrounding Angelique, but he soon got a front row seat to all the strangeness. Now, all the while, the intensity of these things just kept growing. She would barely touch an item and it would rocket across the room as if it had been violently thrown. And as we already know, chairs would slide away from her when she tried to sit in them, but if she actually managed to get seated in a chair, it would quake and buck about as if it was trying to throw her off of it.
Oh my God. Yeah, so these aren't just a few little things that are happening here and there. This is major occurrences are happening.
Absolutely.
Regularly.
Huge. My source says it was strong enough that a grown man couldn't even hold it down. On one occasion, there was a grown man sitting on this large container thing, apparently trying to keep it from moving away from Angelique as she approached him. But it wasn't enough, because apparently the container picked up off the ground and flew across the room with the man still on top of it.
Oof.
And Angelique's bed would also shake and even levitate when she was in it. And the big thing to note here is that these events were noticed to be far more active and intense at night.
I was just going to ask that. I wondered about that, and I don't know what that would really mean. Like, I don't really know why that is. I mean,
Isn't that interesting? Because that was in the in that thing we covered on our Patreon, the Dag family. Things were always worse at night.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know. I don't know if it has to do with our chemical makeup, like when the sun goes down. If it's just our brain chemistry. I know that they say it changes from day to night.
Right.
I don't know. Like if that has something to do with it.
Huh.
Maybe it's because at night she's more in the house. I'm sure maybe in the day she's working
true.
and stuff. But it was happening at work and stuff too, so I don't know. But now things were about to get dangerous.
Oh, no.
Other strange phenomenon were beginning to manifest around Angelique. For example, sometimes when Angelique would enter a room, there would suddenly come these gusts of cold, frigid air, even when all the windows were closed. But that's not the worst of it. Folks who happened to make contact with Angelique would receive what could only be described as a ferocious electrical shock. You know how sometimes you and me will kiss and we'll get a static shock?
Yeah, it's a pain in my fucking ass.
Yeah, it hurt, because, you rub your socks, rub on carpet or whatever. Imagine that, but like an actual electric fucking shock.
Oof.
That was strong enough to make folks literally collapse to the floor or send them flailing across the room.
Oh, God. This is on another level.
And sometimes folks would get the shock even when not making contact with her at all. But the problem was poor Angelique was also getting this shock too. One source says that on a few occasions, she had gotten injured because these shocks would be so intense that she would sort of lose control and flail about, maybe hitting the wall or something.
Yikes.
Almost like seizure. There would be times when it almost seemed like she was having a seizure.
Right.
But here's the strangest thing. They began to notice that metal objects, for the most part, were not affected by this strange force. And here's another kicker. This strange force emanating from Angelique was completely neutralized, or at the very least, greatly reduced, if folks were standing on carpet or a waxed cloth.
Huh.
And vice versa, the effects greatly increased when she was standing on bare ground. It almost sounds like electricity, like how you would insulate yourself. You'd wear like rubber soles or something.
Right. So yeah, this really does seem more electrical rather than like well, I mean, it's still paranormal, but
right.
rather than a poltergeist.
It seems like X-Men sort of shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do.
Well, as always, things just kept escalating. There would come brief moments of relief for like a day or two at a time when it seemed like the strangeness had subsided, but it would only return stronger than ever. And by now, Angelique had become known by the locals as, quote, the electric girl or the poltergeist girl. And folks had by now all but given up hope in finding out what was going on with her. Stumped, the doctor who was treating her suggested that the family submit her for scientific observation. Suddenly, this poor girl from the country found herself in Paris.
Oh,
Found
hello.
herself in Paris at the Academy of the Sciences. Here she went under the care and observation of a few people, a Dr. Secon, an M. Cholet, and a physicist named Francois Arago.
Okay.
It didn't take long for all of them to witness these strange phenomena that seemed to be coming from Angelique. They were especially taken by her ability to seemingly conduct electricity and the ability to repel even the heaviest of objects. Arago would later write about this observance, saying that Angelique could, quote, touch no object without breaking it or throwing it upon the ground. And Dr. Secon also had this to say about observing her. A chair which I was holding as firmly as possible with my foot in both hands was suddenly torn from my grasp when she sat upon it. A little strip of paper which I balanced on my finger was blown away several times as though by a sudden rush of wind. A dining table of considerable size and quite heavy was several times displaced and pushed by the mere contact of the girl's clothes. A small paper wheel placed vertically or horizontally upon its axis received a rapid motion from the emanations which proceeded from the child's wrist and elbow joint. A very large and heavy sofa on which I was seated was violently pushed against the wall when the young girl placed herself beside me. A chair held to the ground by strong persons, on which I sat in a manner so as to occupy but half of it, was suddenly pushed from under me when the girl sat upon the remaining half. A remarkable fact is that each time the chair was raised, it seemed to adhere to the girl's clothes. She followed it for an instant and then disengaged herself. 2 little balls of elderwood or small pieces of quill suspended by a silk thread were disturbed, attracted, and finally separated one from the other. The girl can hardly touch anything with her left hand without causing it to be thrown some distance. When her clothes come in contact with pieces of furniture, she attracts, displaces, and finally overturns them. Wow. So this is a doctor.
This is serious. Yeah, this is really happening.
Right. This is a Parisian doctor.
I mean, God, for God's sakes, a Parisian doctor at that. I mean, God, you gotta believe that something really weird is going on.
Well, given now that Angelique was under the observation of more scientifically minded folks, they were able to make some interesting observations about these strange occurrences. For example, these things almost always manifested in the evening after she had eaten dinner, typically between the hours of 7 and 9 p.m. Also, it would appear that her left hand was far more charged with this energy than her right hand. And it seemed to emit a sort of thrumming, even crackling sound, like an energy, like you would hear like a live wire snapping and popping. The left side of her body was also noticeably warmer than her right side at almost all times. They noticed the effect she seemed to have over magnets without even touching them. Whenever Angelique would touch the north pole of a magnet, she would get a nasty shock. But touching the south pole of the magnet, there was no reaction at all. Angelique herself also stated that she was in a constant state of nervousness and that before an episode would come on, she would be overcome by a sense of dread.
Oh.
Dr. Secon had this to say about it. As soon as it becomes manifest, she rapidly endeavors to escape, as though repulsed by some contrary force. It is only when she thinks of nothing, or when her thoughts are otherwise engaged, that the phenomenon is most sudden and intense. Each phenomenon is marked by extreme fright in the girl, flight, and a general air of alarm. So think about that, like after she eats. Now, obviously it would happen all times a day, but it was strongest in the evening. I wonder if that's almost like because she's giving her body energy.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's, you know what I mean? Like any of us, you eat food for energy. Like, is that something? And also how strange that one side is more than the other. Almost like a magnet, how like a magnet has a north and a south pole.
Right. This really does remind me of X-Men. It just sounds like an early X-Men situation.
Absolutely.
It's so weird.
Well, in February of 1846, so this is just a month after all this started happening, Arago, one of the physicists who was studying her, would publish an article about the case in the Journal of Debates, in which he maintained that Angelique was truly showcasing some sort of electromagnetic phenomenon which had possibly been triggered by some sort of trauma. He was 100% convinced that this was all real. He was so convinced of his beliefs that he recommended a formal committee be established to observe what was happening. But strangely enough, it was around this time that Angelique's abilities appeared to start fading. Well, a committee was assembled to observe her, and they were very skeptical of all these claims that were being thrown about. But the only thing they witnessed that was out of the ordinary was the chairs. When she sat in them, they would rattle and stuff. But all of the other extreme stuff, they did not see. Here's what the committee wrote. It was affirmed that Madame Cottin exercised a most intense action of repulsion upon bodies of all kinds whenever a portion of her garments touched them. Accounts were even given of heavy tables being overturned by the simple contact of a silk thread. No effect of this kind was manifested before the committee. In the narratives communicated to the Academy, it was affirmed that a magnetized needle under the influence of the girl's arm performed rapid oscillations and finally fixed itself quite far from the magnetic meridian. When tried before the committee, a needle, delicately suspended in the same way and under the same circumstances, experienced neither permanent nor momentary displacement. The committee need not enumerate these useless attempts. It will simply content itself with declaring that the only one of the alleged facts which was realized before them was that concerning the sudden and violent movements of chairs in which the young girl seated herself. Upon serious suspicions arising as to the manner in which these movements occurred, the committee has decided that they shall be submitted to an alternative examination. It frankly announces that the investigations tended to discover the fact that certain habitual maneuvers hidden in the feet and hands could have produced the observed fact. So they're saying it's horseshit.
Oh,
They're saying that it's horseshit.
Well, because they're not seeing all the crazy shit that was going on.
Absolutely, and for some reason it seems to start dwindling.
Yeah.
So this committee is assembled just as all this stuff is winding down. But one of the people observing her, an M. Chalet, he was still optimistic. He told the committee to hold off a while until it appeared Angelique's abilities had returned to normal. But that would never happen. A couple months passed by, and by April of 1846, it seemed as though her abilities had disappeared entirely.
Wow.
And of course, this only cemented in the minds of the already skeptical committee that this had been a hoax from the start. And you can see that clearly in the conclusion published by the committee. M. Chalet now declared that the young girl had lost her powers of attraction and repulsion, and that we should be notified as soon as they were restored. Many days have passed since, yet the committee has received no intelligence. We have learned, however, that Madame Cottin is daily received in drawing rooms where she repeats her experiments. After having fully weighed the circumstances, the committee is of the opinion that the communications transmitted to the Academy on the subject of Madame Angelique Cottin should be considered as never having been sent in. Ironically, though, this kind of leaves this part of the story with a kind of like a bad taste in your mouth, but apparently by this time, in April, Angelique had already begun touring around with her family, putting on demonstrations for captivated audiences. And those who have studied this case believe that whether or not her powers were at first legitimate, by this time it's almost certain she was using deceptive tactics and trickery to perform these phenomenon. However, the original group who examined her in Paris were convinced that she did at one time possess incredible abilities. Arago himself would adamantly maintain its veracity until he died. He was quoted saying, "Under particular conditions, the human organism gives forth a physical power, which, without visible instruments, lifts heavy bodies, attracts or repels them according to a law of polarity, overturns them, and produces the phenomena of sound." So interesting. It's kind of one of those things, it came and went for her. It was literally a matter of months.
Interesting. Well, maybe because it had to do maybe with some kind of trauma that started it. So maybe the trauma at the beginning was more at the forefront of her mind or at the forefront of her psyche.
Exactly.
And then as time goes on, maybe it doesn't leave as big of a mark as it used to, possibly. I don't know.
That's very interesting. At the end, we'll kind of discuss that. But now, what's interesting is that there has been other cases of folks who supposedly had the ability to gather and conduct electricity, or at least control it to some extent. There are two cases that actually happened in India. In 2018, the internet went into a frenzy when a video started circulating that claimed to show a 9-year-old boy who seemingly was able to illuminate a light bulb simply by holding it. His name is Abu Tahir, and his father's name is Nizar Tahir, and his father actually worked as an electrician. They noticed his abilities one day when Nazir had happened to bring home a random LED light bulb home from work with him. And when he handed it to his son, they were all shocked when the bulb lit up the moment Abu held it in his hand. In the video, which you can watch, they repeat the action several times, and it does appear to be genuine. But experts also have an interesting theory as to what may be causing this phenomenon in Abu's case. And it might actually be more grounded than you might think. They soon discovered that the bulbs would only light up if they were rechargeable LED bulbs. They say what is probably happening is that Abu is not conducting electricity, but is more so completing a circuit. And if a person has a high salt content in their body, it apparently can give a person increased electrical conductivity.
Salt, you said?
Like, I get if you have a lot of salt in your body.
Oh, so he's salty, okay.
They don't know for sure. They say it's possible that if Abu does have a higher salt content than the average person, it might allow electricity to more effectively flow through his body. Well, there's also another man. He lives up in northern India, and he claims that he doesn't even have to eat food to survive like other folks do. He says he can simply stick his finger in a socket and draw energy that way instead.
Oh, okay. Pop off, my king.
This man's name is Naresh Kumar, but he prefers to go by the human light bulb.
Yeah, I get that. I mean,
It's marketing, baby.
if you can get off by just putting your finger inside of a outlet, then you know what?
Get yours, baby.
Yeah, God bless.
Because of an accident at work, Kumar had come in contact with live wires only to learn that it didn't have an effect on him like it did other people. So just to put some things into perspective, I guess a current as low, and I don't know much about how you measure like milliamps, amps, watt, like how all that works, but just to put things in perspective, according to my source, a current as low as 30 milliamps over an extended period of time has shown to be capable of stopping someone's heart.
Wow.
The average American light socket, now keep in mind this is in India, but I can't imagine it's that different. The average American light socket puts out about 120 volts, which is about 15 to 20 amps. This can very easily kill someone. Kumar claims he can be hooked up to these electrical frequencies for upwards of 30 minutes. However, it should be stated that while he has posted videos of him doing this, there's no way to determine how true it actually is.
Right.
But
Right.
here's a quote from Kumar about his abilities.
Whenever I feel hungry and there's no food in the house, I hold naked wires and within half an hour, I'm satisfied. I eat electricity like it's food. In fact, it helps my energy levels. I can touch any electrical appliance like a television, washing machine, fridge, or an inverter with my bare hands and it doesn't affect me. In fact, it helps my energy levels. I think about 80% of my body is composed of electricity now. There are no switches, and sometimes my children and I fear will get an electric shock. But because he's obsessed with touching naked wires, they're left like this. He even uses his bare hands to switch different appliances off and on.
So that one's a little harder to...
Right. But, he's saying it's true. So, who am I to say that that's not the case?
Well,
who am I?
I know, right? Well, buckle up for this next stud. Because in Serbia, this one's wild. There's a man by the name of Slavica Pajkic, who apparently has an array of electrical abilities.
Oh.
His body can apparently work as an insulator, a conductor, an accumulator, and even a heater. He currently holds the Guinness World Record for when he let 20,000 volts of electricity pass through his body without any harm whatsoever.
Oh my God.
20,000 volts.
Jesus.
And on top of that, he claims he doesn't feel a thing. Not only can he illuminate light bulbs by simply holding them, he can apparently cook a sausage by simply, if he sticks it with a fork and then just holds the other end of the fork up, he apparently can cook a fucking sausage.
Okay, that's kind of cool.
Breakfast in bed, anybody?
Yes.
He can even apparently heat up a cup of water to 97 degrees Celsius in under 2 minutes.
Oh my God.
And one time, for a demonstration, they took a fuel-soaked swab, and just by touching it to his head, it lit a fire, apparently because of an electrical charge. He said he discovered his abilities when he was 17. He and a friend had unknowingly leaned against a fence that happened to be electrified, and his friend obviously leapt away in pain from the shock when he didn't feel anything at all. He says his next goal is to let 1,000,000 volts pass through his body. But in recent years, apparently, folks have become more skeptical of his claim.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty damn superhuman.
That is. But I mean, who knows? Maybe this whole situation with electricity is just like we said before, an X-Men situation.
Right.
I don't
Absolutely. And finally, there's a case about a man in China named Ma Jiangang. He also displays, bizarre abilities, allowing electricity to flow through him without harm. He said he discovered his ability when one day his television wasn't working, and when he went to fix it, he got a huge electrical shock, which can happen, but he felt nothing. And after that, he repeated this test many more times by touching exposed wires, and, normally this would seriously hurt or even kill someone, but he felt nothing. So scientists actually performed several tests on Jiangang and concluded that he had about 7 times the usual resistance to electricity as a normal person.
Wow.
Now, those are just other stories on the site, and I'm sure there's many other ones about people who've claimed to have when it comes to electricity, but let's talk about Angelique, though.
Yeah.
Because for her, it was never about withstanding electricity. They didn't even, it just seemed to be electricity.
Right. It's it's not so much like how much pain can you withstand or how much trauma can you handle. It's more so she just had these abilities to create electricity, I guess. I don't really know.
Also, unfortunately for her, it seemed like a lot of times she would get the same amount of shock as anyone else would, too.
Right.
That's why people think maybe this is some sort of an obscure version of a poltergeist.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, yeah.
So what do we know about the extreme poltergeist cases we've talked about? There's obviously that sort of shit, but then there's, voices, all sorts of stuff. Like almost everything you can imagine. It's like a typical haunting, voices, knocking, banging.
Things moving, things disappearing.
Right. And, obviously the prevailing theory we talk about here when it comes to poltergeists is this something that happens to typically young people, primarily girls. It does happen to boys too, when they reach a certain age, around puberty age. Is it possible that this, and add to that maybe possible trauma, whether it's domestic violence, abuse, whatever it could be.
Right.
And perhaps it brings these things to the surface. But Angelique's case is interesting in that all of that other poltergeist shit isn't really happening. Like voices, it's people obviously thought she might have been under the influence of the devil, but there was nothing like a spirit talking through her,
right,
knocking on the wall. It was like literally like X-Men shit. But also think about this, poltergeists typically eventually leave.
Right.
Sometimes they can stick around for years, but they eventually leave. Angelique's case is very unique in that it literally started in January and by April was entirely gone.
Right.
And it was so intense. So it's like, did something happen to her right before this? Maybe if we're going with the trauma angle.
Right.
There's nothing my sources mention about her home life and everything. I know it says they were, quote, peasants. So I mean, regardless if her family was nice to her or not, I'm sure
that's
life
a hard
wasn't
life,
easy. Yeah. And what's so fascinating is it's not just things moving either. It's this it kind of obeys the laws of magnetism.
Yes.
That's what's weird about it.
And that the fact that she can just walk by something and not even touch it sometimes.
Right.
And there can be a big reaction. And also, like you said, too, it's not just metal or water or something like that we know conducts electricity.
Right.
It's like it could be paper or anything.
Right. But this is definitely something I want to look into more because if this is a poltergeist case, it's a very unique one. And it kind of sucks that, it kind of ends bitterly with her basically being called out for faking.
Right.
Even if at one time she did have these abilities. Yeah, it's very strange. I'm sure her family also, as scared as they were, there was probably a part of them that was like, wow, this could change our lives as well.
Exactly. I was just going to say, it's like, it sucks that happened, but at the same time, can you really blame them for trying to take advantage of a situation?
Right.
When they might have been totally desperate.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
Yeah, so very fascinating and something to think about.
Absolutely. Dylan, thank you so much for all of your hard work and fantastic research. If you guys have any thoughts or theories on what you think is going on, or if you have heard of similar stories, please feel free to reach out to us anytime. You can DM us on any of our social media accounts, or you can email us at creepstreetpodcast@gmail.com.
Yes, please.
Dylan, will you please list off our beloved top tier Patreon donors?
Ooh, let me tell you something. These people will give you an electric shock.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, the Dream James Watkins, the Finnish Face via Lundqvist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Vivacious Vicky McHugh, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid Chris Hackworth, the oh-so-suave Sean Richardson, the British Bone Breaker Bex Martin, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Kiker, the Nightmare of New Zealand Noeline Vivilli, the Loathsome Johnny Love, the Carnivorous Kevin Bogey, the Killer Stud Carl Staub, the Firestarter Heather Carter, the Conqueror Christopher Damian Damaris, the Awfully Awesome Annie, the Murderous Maggie Leach, the Sir of Sexy Sam Hackworth, the Evil Elizabeth Riley, and Lauren Hellfire Hernandez Lopez.
Dylan, thank you so much for listing off all those fantastic names. And if you would like to be just like them, please head on over to patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast.
Absolutely. We got all sorts of stuff. We got a $2 tier, $5 tier, $10 tier, each tier with its own set of goodies. Of course, please like, rate, subscribe, tell your friends, family, loved ones, convert the uninitiated. And like we said, this is coming out the day we're coming back from vacation. So we've got this done well in advance. We're going to enjoy ourselves, but then we cannot wait to dive back into all things Creep Street. What I love is we didn't miss a single week.
No.
We've never missed a week. Knock on wood. I don't want to jinx us, but
Yeah, that's right.
in over 2 years. So, all right, I think we're all set.
I think so.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
Good night and goodbye.